Hello, I'm Robert Ellsberg. I'm the publisher of Orbis books. I'm joined today by two friends who are the co-editors of a new book, Catholic Women Preach, Raising Voices, Renewing the Church, and this is Cycle A. These are Catholic women from all over the world, diverse experiences, offering reflections on the gospel, preaching homilies, following the readings for the liturgical year, that is to say all the Sundays and principal feast days, and in this case, following each of the 3 years of the liturgical cycle. We are currently in Cycle A, so this is this year's volume. The book is edited by Betty Ann Donnelly, Elizabeth Donnelly, and Russ Petrus. Both of them are lay Catholics with theological degrees. Russ is the co-director of Future Church. Betty Ann Donnelly is a former Maryknoll lay missioner. She served on the boards of many groups such as Bread for the World and the Ignatian Solidarity Network. I wonder if I could just ask you, first of all, to describe a little better than I did what this book is and where it came from. Either of you.
Robert, thank you so much for having us. This book is a reflection of the Catholic Women Preach website, which Russ and I and other colleagues at Future Church launched in Advent of 2016. So we have almost 400 homilies now fully accessible on the website. And so at Robert's encouragement, what we did, we had 2 cycles of Year A homilies on the website, and we chose which of the 2 was stronger for each Sunday and Holy Day of Obligation. And we compiled them, as you said, to accompany people through the liturgical year. And the book is introduced with a very powerful foreword by Sister Barbara Reed, the president of the Catholic Theological Union, about the clear historical record that women preached in the New Testament and throughout church history.
What was the idea behind launching this series online and then, now in book form? Why do we need a book like this?
Yeah, there's been a growing movement towards this for many years. I know Future Church, the organization I work for a long time, even before Catholic Women Preach, had Mary Magdalene celebrations each July 22nd. Of course, Mary Magdalene is the first who is commissioned by Jesus to go and literally preach the good news of Easter. And so we would have hundreds of women from the Cleveland area, where Future Church is headquartered, attend these special liturgies, and women would preach at them. And for the first time in many of these women's lives, they were seeing themselves reflected, not only at the ambo, but also in the preaching, in the stories that were being shared, in the lives that were being broken open, and the way the scriptures were being opened for them. And so we at Future Church discerned a need for this to be a broader effort, to go beyond just what we were able to do through Future Church. And so we were already working on some way of institutionalizing these homilies, which we were calling at that time unheard homilies. And then we discovered that Betty Ann was also working on a very similar project. And so we thought it would be nice to combine forces and really put both of our energies into it. And we've been overwhelmed by the response to Catholic Women Preach, and by the obvious hunger that it both makes manifest and helps to satisfy for folks out there in the church.
I want to give a shout out to the fellows at the Woodstock Theological Center at Georgetown. In Advent of 2011, they felt that women's voices were not being heard. And so they asked 4 of us, they filmed, the wonderful documentary filmmakers, Frank and Mary Frost, filmed 4 of us preaching on the Sunday readings for Advent in Copley Crypt Chapel. And they put them out on Vimeo. So they got limited circulation, but a lot of positive feedback from the Woodstock community. And so it was with that experience in mind that I thought, it just hit me a year or two later. We've got to people have to see women preach, not just read their preaching. But so many Catholics have never seen a woman preach.
Mhm.
And it took me a while to find out with whom to partner. But as Russ said, I was just so excited that the people at Future Church also wanted to do this, and we joined forces. And it's been a terrific collaboration.
Mhm. Of course, many Christians of other churches, denominations, have the experience of hearing women preach in church. Catholics don't have that experience, since preaching is confined just to the ordained clergy, deacons or priests. So this really that means they're not hearing these voices, but there are also a lot of voices that are not being heard. And it was really impressive, the kind of range of people that you were able to invite and who responded to that invitation, because they include people with extraordinary experience in leadership in the church and theological education and competence, people who actually teach homiletics, but are not permitted to speak in church themselves or preach. Could you talk a little bit about, not just including these voices, but what kind of perspectives do you think that brings to the experience of liturgy and our reception of the word?
One of the very interesting, I think, happy coincidences that we had actually just this past Advent was that Colleen Donnelly, who some of you may know works for America Media, was in the last month of her pregnancy preaching on the readings for the fourth Sunday of Advent, where the angel appears to Joseph in a dream, because he's thinking about sort of quietly leaving Mary. And so she was able to preach from her perspective as a woman in these final stages of pregnancy, what complications and trials and all the burdens that she's bearing, not only just as a pregnant woman, but also knowing that she's bearing this special child. And so to be able to delve into that part of a woman's psychology and a woman's experience is something that I admit, even if I were an ordained man, I would never be able to do. And I think that's one of the things that women bring to the scriptures in a way that men simply can't. But of course, as you remark, Robert, there are so many women out there who are doing phenomenal things in the church. In fact, 80% of the church's workforce is women.
Yes.
Women are carrying out the gospel in remarkable ways that we're just scratching the surface of. And it's a privilege to be able to bring their perspectives. Some of them are working in criminal justice reform. Some of them are working with organizations that help to feed the hungry. Some of them are working to end the death penalty. And so they bring that life experience with them and their ministries with them to their preaching in a way that, for most Catholics, the limited perspective of their parish priest just can't do. And that's not to diminish what a parish priest is doing. Certainly they play an important role in the life of the church, but their experience and perspective is limited. And so sometimes they just can't get into the scriptures in a way that we choose. And particularly Betty Ann does a fantastic job of pairing the right preacher with the right set of scriptures. And it's always amazing to discover the gold mines that she's mining and the women that she's bringing forward and lifting up.
I've enjoyed hearing about that from you, Betty Ann, because it's almost like planning a special dinner party or something, like who you want sitting next to each other, because it's not just that you put out this invitation, lots of women, would you do a sermon for us, but you often think, I've got the right person just for this particular Sunday. Could you give some examples of that have stood out for you?
Yeah, I'll give you two quick examples. As you know, one of the gospel readings in one summer is Jesus cures the little girl, and he says to her in Aramaic, Talitha cum, little girl, get up. So I thought, Catholic Women Religious, organized worldwide in the Union of International Superiors General, they have a network of over 1,000 sisters around the world working against human trafficking. And so the name of the network is Talitha Cum. So I invited the Italian sister who coordinates the network to preach on that reading, and she was superb. And the second example is we had a very distinguished theologian from the Philippines, Agnes Brazal, preach for us. And then she recommended one of her doctoral students, Kristen Meneses. And she said that Kristen's specialty is deaf ethics. So of course I asked her to preach on the reading of Jesus curing the deaf man. But she said, you know, a lot of people, very interesting take, a lot of people in the deaf community don't feel that they need to be healed, but rather Jesus was calling us Ephatha, be open, listen. We should be listening to the experience of people experiencing deafness. So as Russ said, it's such a delight to try to find the right person for the reading. And we have had a few repeat preachers, but Colleen's an example. She had preached beautifully for us before, but then she reached out to me and said, can I preach in Advent? Because I want to preach when I'm 9 months pregnant.
Yeah, right. Well, you have people from you do from Africa and Asia, Latin America. Some of the contributors are very well known. Maybe you could just mention some of the names that people will immediately recognize.
Russ?
Yeah, I think some of the household names that people might be aware of are Sister Simone Campbell, who preaches beautifully for Ash Wednesday in this particular volume. We've had Sister Helen Prejean, who preached for Easter. She's another example of like the perfect person to preach for that feast day. We've had Sister Joan Chittister preach. So there have just been a remarkable number of really gifted women who for good reason have made a name for themselves, and we're honored that they preach. But we're also really fortunate and blessed by the unknown names, the people who don't otherwise have a platform, who haven't written books, aren't getting interviews on TV to get their message and their perspectives out.
I staffed a booth for Catholic Women Preach at the Ignatian Solidarity Network's Teach-In for Justice, and all these young MDiv women were coming over saying how much they love the website, how they look forward to the book, because as Russ said, you know, that a lot of them are seeking platforms for preaching. And I just want to echo what you said, Robert, that we try to be as diverse and international as possible. I commend, we have a very distinguished advisory board, and Jim Keenan, Kristen Heyer have been extremely generous in giving us the names of Catholic ethicists involved in Catholic theological ethics in the world church. So it's just been a privilege to, again, reach out to these women whom we so admire and invite them to preach.
Have you had any, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sorry. It's a little tough for three of us.
Yeah, I know.
Speaking of diversity, one of the things that we've done the last 3 Lents, and this will be the 3rd Lent now, is that we've been centering the voices of women of color. And that has, one of the things that that we don't see in a lot of churches, just even parishes, is priests of color. So we're able to lift up these women's voices. We're talking African American women, Latina women of Asian or Pacific Islander heritage. And it's really been a privilege to center those voices, especially during the most sacred time of the church year. And I'll tell you what, particularly women from the African American community, last year we had Valerie Lewis Mosley preach on Good Friday. And it was a perspective that I think a lot of white Catholics really need to hear and really need to take in. So it's a privilege to be able to lift up those voices.
Yes, we purposely started when we launched the website in Advent of 2016. We purposely started with Sister Jamie Phelps, a distinguished African-American theologian. And to come full circle, she was giving a talk at Notre Dame, and a young woman named Kayla August at Notre Dame said to Sister Jamie, you know, I'm thinking about I'd love to do a doctorate in preaching. What do you think? And Jamie said to her, you really have to use your gift for the good of the church. Well, Kayla's now doing a doctorate. She's studying for a doctorate at BC, and she's preached what, Russ, twice for us? Kayla's quite gifted.
Yeah. And she actually just she preached at the event that we had at BC just this last week on Anna, who is the prophetess of the feast, or the prophet of the feast of the presentation, who is made optional. There's brackets around her. And so her story can be completely cut out. And so a lot of Catholics may not even ever hear about Anna, let alone have an opportunity to hear a woman reflect on Anna's witness. And so that was really cool.
And so we're a new feature of the website we're very excited about. Russ is amazing. I mean, as Russ compiles the data, we've had, I think, a third of all of our preachers have been women of color. So, but we have a new feature on the website. It's going to be a tab most likely called Hidden Sisters. So we're going to ask people to preach on the stories of women in the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament who are either completely omitted from the lectionary, or, as Russ gave in this example, they're made optional as part of a longer reading. It's often the women who get cut out, or only preached on a weekday. So we already have one on the website. Sister Carolyn Osick preached really powerfully on the Feast of St. Phoebe, September 3rd. As some of you know, the only time the word deacon is used in the New Testament associated with anyone's name, Romans 16, Paul says, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, deacon of the Church of Chencre. Help her out in the ministry in any way you can. She's been so helpful to me. You will never hear Phoebe mentioned in church. She's not in the lectionary year A, B, or C, because it might confuse the faithful.
Well, there are these stories in the Gospels. You mentioned Anna, but the Samaritan woman who goes, the woman at the well, and she goes out and says, many of the people in her land believed on the strength of her witness. She goes around, testifying. We don't actually even know her name, so she doesn't have a feast day. But there's those examples of women bearing witness to the gospel, proclaiming the gospel. Of course, Mary Magdalene, you mentioned, and maybe we should hold up again. Tell us about this picture that appears on the cover of the book.
Right. So the cover art, we are just so delighted that Laura James has lended her beautiful talents to this series. She's agreed to provide the cover art. This particular piece was commissioned by Rita Houlihan, who has preached for Catholic Women Preach and is a very strong advocate for reclaiming the true role that Mary Magdalene played in the early church. So this is actually from a series, and in this particular panel from the series, Mary has already been commissioned by Jesus to go and tell the others that Jesus is risen from the dead. And so this is her in the upper room preaching, proclaiming to the others that Jesus is alive, and explaining the revelation that he has given her. And next year we actually have for the year B volume, in another stroke of brilliant coincidence, beautiful coincidence, Laura James is again doing the art, but at this time it's going to be a piece of Mary proclaiming the Magnificat. And Cecilia Gonzalez Andreu, who is a theological esthetician or aesthetic theologian, she works on the theology of beauty, and she is actually writing the foreword, and so she addresses the cover art in the foreword, which is really beautiful to bring the whole package together.
So we're so grateful to Orbis that Year B book will come out, we think, in September or October, just in time for another Year B to roll around. So once again, great Christmas gift, wonderful. So there eventually will be a 3-volume series of the best of Catholic women preach, and her art is absolutely stunning.
Remind me again. So how long are these homilies when on the website? They're just a few minutes.
So we ask people to keep it short. We have found, Russ looks at the data, the sweet spot is 5 to 7 minutes. And so these are 5 to 7 minute homilies.
Should point out that, Pope Francis recently was speaking about homilies, which he said in most Catholic churches are a disaster. And he said they must not be longer than 10 minutes. So I think he'd be very happy with this book. I hope you can get it into his hands. The homilies here on the page are 3 or 4 pages long. You can read them quickly. They hold your attention. They give you something to think about all day and all week. And so I want to just thank you very much both for joining us today, and the amazing idea you had and the execution of this idea and the transition from a website to the printed page. I'm so glad that we brought out the first volume, which includes many Orbis authors, and look forward to, we're already starting to work on the next one for Cycle B. So thank you very much, and wish great success and great audience for this wonderful book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.